everyone. Today we're going to talk about student data folders and data summaries. All right, in case you don't know just a little bit about us, we are the Easter Seals Outreach Program and Technology Services. We are a partnership that's unique from the Department of Ed and Easter Seals. So if you look there on the slide, the Department of Ed's mission to lead the nation in student-focused inclusive education, and the Easter Seals mission to provide exceptional services to people with disabilities so they can learn, work, and play in their communities. And the outreach programs for those two missions combine. At Outreach, we have a multi-tiered system of supports. So we have system supports, that are available to the entire state. We have a website that we're building out and getting some great resources on. That's where you will find the recording from today, along with all the resources that we share. You can find information about professional learning opportunities that we offer on our website, and also our loan program. If you're not familiar with the loan program, there's a plethora of different things that you can borrow, from high-tech, high-dollar communication devices to devices to assist students with feeding, to writing, apps, iPads, just a plethora of different things, 6-week loans. You can test those out with your students and determine if they're a good fit before your district makes a purchase. So if you haven't checked out our loan program, check it out. There's even curriculum in there. So that's another great feature of that statewide support that we offer to everybody. There's also resource guides on there for assistive technology, and we're working on one for feeding and swallowing. So just be on the lookout for that. That one's coming soon. We also have projects I mentioned earlier that we do with school districts. So that's kind of our middle tier on our multi-tier system. And we work with those specific districts to install evidence-based practices. And we do that through Project Prepare, also through our assistive technology project. And then the very top of our pyramid is circuit referrals. Many of you are familiar with that system. It's been existing in Arkansas for many years, and that's that student specific. So that's just kind of a quick overview of who we are. And then for today, I can get my slides working. The things that we're going to talk about are data folders. It's the beginning of the school year, and unfortunately, we've got COVID again. We were hoping that we'd be done with this by this school year, and so I know you guys are all worn out and tired, and we appreciate the work that you're all doing. And so we want to start with data, just some tidbits to help you guys get organized and maybe make this school year go a little more smoothly. So we're going to talk about data folders. We're going to look at how to set them up, what needs to go in them, and then we're going to take it a step further. So once you've got your data organized, what are you going to do with it? How are you going to organize it on your student summaries in a way that will assist you with your lesson planning? We're also going to introduce a task analysis. Each of our trainings will have an associated task analysis, because I don't know about you guys, but I get back from training sometimes and I'm like, well, I was really inspired in the moment, but I'm not sure where to start. And so the task analysis flows right with the training. And it's your what do I do on Monday? It's your quick start guide for the things that you're going to learn in our trainings. And then we're going to look at some resources. All right, this next slide is new, but there's a lot going on in the state of Arkansas, guys. And we wanted to make sure and take this opportunity to keep everybody as up to date as we can on the steps that we're taking here in Arkansas to influence positive student outcomes. That's our objective there. So really the goal and the mission that we have for Project Prepare is to close that research to practice gap. So by that, I mean the plethora of research that people are doing at universities across the country and across the world on what works with these kids. What does evidence and research tell us is an effective way to use our time as teachers? So that's the research. And then the practice is when it shows up in the classroom. And guys, there's a startling number of years, up to 20, and some estimates say that's conservative, that it may be more like 25 or 30. By the time research proves something works and it shows up regularly in a classroom, that's a long time. Our teachers need those tools now. Our educators need those tools now. So that's the mission for Project Prepare, is to close that research to practice gap. And we know that if we do, then we're going to reach our destination, which you'll see on the right, which is positive student outcomes. All right. Does anybody relate to this picture? This is how I felt at the beginning of every single school year. Only in reality, there's probably, like, depending on where you teach, 10 to 15 to 25 stacks of paperwork that look just like that. It's a lot of data. It's a lot of things to consider. And I want to start with sharing a story with you that kind of sparked this whole data folder, data summaries that we're going to talk about today for me in my career. So as a baby teacher, I was teaching in Central Arkansas, and I was at a new school, and they had 15 wonderful, amazing students who had self-contained minutes on their IEP. So they spent a lot of time in my room. It was an elementary school, so I had K through 5, 6 wonderful grade levels of these little angels, and a variety of different disabilities and needs. And then my 15 stacks of paper. And I had a couple of round tables and a kidney table, but there wasn't much in the room. It was bare. And I had all this paperwork, and I was fresh out of school, so I knew I was legally obligated, and I took my legal responsibility very seriously. And I went home crying every single day. I had a student in my room named Malcolm, and Malcolm was a student with CP and an intellectual disability. Malcolm had physical needs as well as academic needs. So the things just for Malcolm, and I had 15 kids in that room, but just for Malcolm, I had to remember to make sure he got enough calories. I had to make sure that he got up against the wall and did a specific heel stretch I think it was 2 or 3 times a day, every day. He was on a toileting schedule, so he had some personal care needs. He was also he was a handful, y'all. He was a handful. So on top of all of this, Malcolm was a handful. But he had OT, PT, and speech. And I worked with an amazing group of related services. And they supported me a lot. And they came in the room and they showed me how to get Malcolm's hands up on the wall and where to put his feet on the floor. And y'all, I went home that day after I talked to them and just bawled. I was like, there's no way. They've got the wrong guy. I do not belong in this room. I cannot keep up with all of this. And so that's when things really started to cement for me that I had to have systems. I had no systems, and I needed systems, because that was the only way I was going to be able to support the diverse needs of all these students, the students in a wheelchair that needed to be in a stander a certain amount of time. And then I had some students who went out to regular ed for some services. It was a lot. And so I felt like this guy. I was drowning in data. And so that's when we really started to think about what does this look like? How can we create a system around this to make it very concrete in a way that I could implement these IEPs? And so if you see those piles on the left, you can probably relate to some of those. And so our suggestion here is that you organize all that data in a very predictable way, and you do it the same for all your students in a student data binder. So who needs them? Everybody needs them. Every single student you have needs a data binder. These data binders are going to change your lives once you start putting them together. Your IEPs are going to write themselves, guys. Your PLAF statements are never going to have looked better. If you're an administrator, I see a couple of administrators on the screen today, you'll have some predictability with the data, and you can start installing more systems within that. So everybody needs a data folder. If you're a paper and pencil kind of gal, which I am, unfortunately, I have not switched completely to digital. Most things I do, but my data, I still have to be able to turn the pages on that. So if you are, here's you a little bit of things that you might want to consider. 3-ring binders, and guys, you're going to want at least 2 inches. At 3-inch, that's going to be a lot to carry around if you need to take one home to do some work, but I would say at least 2 inches. I like tab dividers, and we're going to show you a sample table of contents here in a minute that'll kind of give you an example of how to break that up. and a Sharpie and a hole punch. Nothing super fancy, but just to kind of give you a place to start. Now, some of you may be thinking, why am I sitting here? I've got a working folder. I've been doing this for years. If you already have a system, please do not hear me that I'm asking you to abandon your system. If you've got a system, excellent news. We'll keep on running that system. If you don't have a system or your current system's not working, I encourage you to try this and see how it supports you. Okay, if you are a digital person, a couple of few different options here. One is a live binder. I have access to a lot of live binders, but I've never created one. I know that's stuff that's published to the web. So that one makes me a little bit nervous because it would be putting all of our student information out there, but I know people do it. So there's a way, contact your IT people, but it sets up across the top just like your regular binder would. It has tabs that you can scan and upload your documents. So that's one option. A lot of districts are already using Google Drive, but what I've seen so far is that paperwork is uploaded by conference, and I'm encouraging you to organize it topically. So it might be that you need to scan those things and reorganize them just a little bit. And then another option is Google Slides. We had a Project Prepare district last year that had a principal who took a Google slide deck, created a table of contents, and she set it up where there's hyperlinks within different slides for teachers to upload stuff. And it's actually pretty cool. Personally, it would not have worked for me, but everybody's brain is going to conceptualize these things differently. So if that's something that you're interested in, drop a note in the chat or email one of us and we will send you that sample copy. But you can definitely do it digitally if that's how you prefer. Okay, so here is the table of contents. Now we're going to dig a little bit deeper into what this data should look like. And in the chat, we'll drop a copy of this. And the way we do these links is you'll click on it and it'll tell you to make a copy. Once you've made a copy, it's yours to keep. You can edit it and do whatever you need to. You can make yourself notes on it. Nobody will be able to see it but you. So go ahead and click on the link. Hopefully somebody's going to drop that in the chat for us. And then you'll be able to kind of piddle around with this a little bit. What you should have access to now is the IP and your current psychological, speech, OTPT, vision. Those are kind of due process type things. So you should have access to those things. So it's a great first step. We have to eat this elephant one bite at a time. And that big stack of paperwork is going to take some time. So don't bite it all off at once. Start small. You can just throw your IEP and your eval. If you are a Project Prepare implementation site, this is something we want you guys to go ahead and get started on because we're going to be building on this. And when we meet again in October to look at zoning plans, we definitely want to have this data on your students available. If you're not a Project Prepare school and you want to go ahead and dig in, or if you are an implementation site and you want to see, we're going to zoom back out and look at the big picture for a second and talk about some of the different features that we're encouraging you to include in your data folder. So if you look at number 1, that's the student summary. We're going to come back to that. 2 and 3, we just talked about. That's your IEP and your evals. Number 4 is your reinforcement inventory. And these will be things that we build slowly throughout our Project Prepare Tuesdays. We'll do a whole training on reinforcement, give you some resources, and then you can include those in your data binder. But everybody needs a reinforcement inventory, or at least an about me sheet if you've got students that are accessing Reg Ed, or if you do have students accessing Reg Ed, maybe your student has autism or ADHD and really struggles with motivation and engagement in the classroom. That's still a really key piece to include. The next 2 pieces are what we call non-negotiables around the office. We gotta have these pieces of data in our data binders, and those are around literacy and math. So the way this is set up right now, the column on the left may be some CBAs or curriculum-based assessments that you would see in a Reg Ed environment. And those are still useful for our students. So if you don't have a way to measure how your students are progressing through the science of reading, or you don't have a good measure to assess comprehension for your students. This is a great opportunity to collaborate with your Reg Ed peers, because I promise you, they're monitoring the students in Reg Ed somehow. And it might be that you could pull some of those assessments or pieces of those assessments in to inform your instruction. So it's an area of the binder we have to have. If you don't currently have assessments, we encourage you to reach out to your Gen Ed counterparts and see if there's assessments being used throughout your building that you could use in your data binder and to inform your instruction. If you have students that might have more self-contained minutes, there's some things on the right there that we have seen in self-contained classrooms across the state. Teach Town, Star, Foundations, I think is how you say that, but just a few different pieces that we know have good assessments in them. And some of that curriculum we have in our loan program. So if you're having trouble there and you can't find something that you need with your Reg Ed counterparts, email one of us, reach out, and we'll try to get you hooked up with something that'll help guide your instruction there. But we have to have something to assess our literacy needs of our students. And the same thing with math. We're going to zoom in on section 7, the collaboration with related services, in just a second. So I'm going to go down to section 8 and just tell you that you have to have a place in this folder for your data that you're taking live in your classroom. So data that you're taking on your IEP goals, maybe from your discrete trial station, maybe you're implementing an augmented communication device and you've got some data on how often the student's using it, what words they're using. All that live data, we want to come right into the back of this binder. So when you sit down to update your goals every quarter, you'll have that data right there. It's just a good catch-all place for that. Okay. Let's talk about section 7. That's really where this collaboration piece comes in. And there's going to be a lot of different pieces that could fit into this section. And just like anything else we give you in Project Prepare, it's a sample. And we want you to customize it and make it your own. So if those literacy assessments don't match what you're doing in your district, just tweak it and make it reflect what the district expectations are. And this section is going to be individualized part of the student's needs. So does the student have a communication device? Maybe your speech pathologist dropped you off a little pamphlet or a tip sheet on that particular device and how to program it. Maybe there are some specific prompting strategies. Anything that you're getting related to communication, make it a section because that's important. Our kids have to be able to communicate to us what they know. Assistive technology is another section that we recommend that you put in your notebooks, and this spans kindergarten through 12th grade, from a self-contained support to a co-taught support or an indirect support. All of our kids are using technology in some form or another, and we need to have that included in our data binders. Personal care. See where this stuff starts. If you don't have a system to organize, do you guys see where this stuff can start to really pile up? And how in the world do we make sure and not let any of the balls drop? Because that's our job. We're case managers. We're supposed to be organizing this circus. And if we don't have a system, then we're going to be lost. So personal care needs specialized equipment. I mentioned earlier with that classroom that I had, we had standards, we had gait trainers, we had wheelchairs, we had stretching. We had to make sure somebody's AFOs weren't rubbing a hole in their foot there's just so many things. You got to start by getting organized. The next one's medical and healthcare. And this is one that sometimes I see we could beef up, is really that collaboration with the school nurse. Our kiddos have allergies. They have all kinds of different things. Some of them have like feeding tubes and very specific needs that we can collaborate with the nurse to make sure that our students are getting everything that they need. Also, functional behavior assessments and accompanying behavior intervention plans. So if your student has behavior that's impacting their ability to access LRE or your lessons and it's causing disruption or whatever necessitates the need for an FBA, make sure that you've got that included and you've planned for that and you have a section for it in your binder. And we had mentioned earlier about the HLP, so I'm just going to go ahead and bring that back in. HLP number 1 is collaborate with professionals to increase student success. So I want to take that ambiguity away from the HLPs. Guys, a lot of it is stuff that we're already doing. But I want to call that to your attention. It folds right in with this student data folder. We all have to work together. It's taken OT, PT, speech, school nurses, gen ed, reg ed, special ed supervisors, principals. I mean, it's just an army of people supporting these kiddos. And our job as special ed is to be the center of that and make sure that we're coordinating all those services. So that's my major plug. Please, please consider getting a good system to organize your data if you have not already. All right, let's see. Okay. You can see just by looking at this example that we have up here, this teacher has a student that's doing some work with N2I. That's a curriculum that we see often in programs, self-contained programs. They have a communication log in there. They have DLM, also for our students with the most significant cognitive disabilities. So they've got sections for all of that in their binder. And that just goes to show you they've taken this concept and really have made it their own and applied it. And that's what we want for you guys to do too. And you have to update it, right? We got to have quarterly progress. Those data sheets we talked about earlier before an IEP conference is a good time to update some of that stuff and remove the old. And then also prior to a transition to a new teacher. I will tell you that if a teacher ever handed me a data binder like we're suggesting, I would think I had died and gone to teacher heaven. One, the implications for that student to have continuity in their programming. I don't get the student and wait 6 months to figure out where they're at and what they need, because I know that teacher's passed off a roadmap for me. And I just think it would be probably the biggest gift you could give to a student and to a new teacher. So prior to transitioning is a good time to make sure that everything's updated and that you have a system for passing that data along to a new teacher. All right. So just kind of wrap up the student folder section, data folder, before we move on to the summaries. Your IEPs are going to write themselves. There's a few teachers on here that have done this. Raise your hand if you have been baptized in the data folders and data summaries way of life, but your IEPs really will write themselves. It primes the pump for inclusion, guys. If you know exactly where your students are compared to their reg ed peers, and you know if this is where they're at, this is good technology to put in place. If you know this is where they're at, these are some good modifications and accommodations for that student. You're opening up doors for them to be able to access the gen ed environment, and that's the goal. We don't want students to come to special ed and be in special ed their whole lives. We want to open that door. So having good organized data is a good first step in looking at where else we can include our students. It's also perfect for PLCs, guys. When you get a team of teachers together and they're all looking at their functional routine data and they're talking about different prompting levels, and this is the visual support I used for that, all of a sudden you've got the best conversation and teachers are sharing and feeling supported. And that is hard sometimes for self-contained teachers because they can be a singleton in the building. So having the data folders organized and ready to talk about in your PLCs is also very powerful. We talked about transition, and then also at parent-teacher conference. If you've got your data folders there, you've got everything organized, you're prepared to answer parent questions, and that parent's going to have a huge sense of relief that they're in good hands. I managed everything for poor Malcolm after I got my life together, but it took getting a system in place. Okay, so now that we've got our data and we've got it into a binder, it's organized, how do we get to lesson plans? Because that's still a lot, right? It's still this big mountain of data, and we've got to get to how does that impact instruction? That's the next little tidbit. So if you've been tuned out on us because you've already got a system, tune back in, because this is about to give you some good tools. All right, in the middle, you'll see the student data summary. And guys, this is the bridge. For me, it was the golden ticket. And I can tell you, working with teachers across the state, this is the missing piece. How do we go from all this information on kids to what I'm doing at 9:15 at the red station or at 9:15 in my literacy group? And this is it. We need a way to take all that information and put it in one place so that we're ready to move forward with instruction. And that's what the student summary does. So we're going to zoom forward. And we talked